Today's lesson is on CSEC English A. We are going to focus on writer's craft in comprehension. I am Jeline Baker Francis. Let me change my glasses. Hey, schoolers, school's not out, education still a keep. Nobody tell me about you give up and asleep. Come take a look on your TV screen. Ready for learn, let me show you what I mean. So grab your book, grab your pen, text your friend. Time to get hype about learning again. Today we are going to learn about comprehension, writer's craft, tone and diction. By class finish, me hope you fully understand. So keep watching, make we execute a plan. Nobody worry about the distance thing, cause to life's table your best you have to bring, cause excellence is still the ultimate. So make we do this to the utmost best. Hey, school's not out, education still a keep. Nobody tell me about you tired and asleep. Today we are going to look on comprehension. Fischel don't CSEC exam. Fischel don't CSEC exam. Okay, students, as was mentioned earlier, today we're going to be looking at the writer's craft in comprehension. And as you know, this year, CSEC comprehension is 35 marks and it is section B of the multiple choice examination. Also want to remind you that this comprehension is sectioned into poems and passages, and sometimes you'll get diagrams and so on to look at. And so I want to prepare you for that. So today we're going to be focusing on just a few of these objectives here. They were taken from the English syllabus from the May to June 2018 examination. And we have further broken them down so that we can focus on some aspects of each today. So the first one, we're going to be focusing on the writer's craft to include tone, diction, and purpose. And then we're going to be doing some practice. And finally, I will give you a comprehension exercise to test what you have learned. Okay, so let's get straight into class. Okay, so the writer's craft refers to anything done on purpose to make the author's writing appear or sound a particular way. The craft is therefore the art of writing. And some of these include features of language such as tone, diction, purpose, audience, style, mood, and the list goes on. But as I said earlier, today we're going to be focusing on tone, diction, and purpose. All right, so let's start with tone. Tone is the attitude the writer has towards an audience or a subject. It alludes to the author's point of view, his perspective, or his thinking. Tone is directly linked to diction, as choice of words is crucial to conveying the tone. And of course, we're going to be talking about diction a little while from now. All right, let's delve some more into the writer's tone. Here we have a picture, and the statement on the picture, it says, "It was a dark and stormy night." Now, if you heard this statement, or if you read this statement, what tone comes to mind? Now, if you thought you heard something that was fun, or you heard something that was neutral, then maybe you need to check again, because this tone actually reflects somewhat of a mystery, and usually it can be seen at the beginning or it is a part of a story. Let's look at another one. This one says, "May I ask who's calling?" If you guessed that this tone was a neutral tone or a sarcastic tone, then maybe not. But if you guessed that it was quizzical or somewhat curious, something that maybe your mother would say, then you're definitely thinking on the right path. Let's look at another one. "I was very frightened." Now, what does this tone reflect to your mind? By now, I hope all my students are up with their books in their hand and are ready to do some work. If you suggested that this tone sounds a little bit sad, or it sounds a little bit scary, or a little bit frightening, then you would be definitely thinking on the right path. But the best answer in this instance would to think that this is a frightening statement, especially since we have the word frightened there. What about this one? It says, "Wow, another field trip. What a cool school year." Now in this tone, It is definitely laced with something, and it's not neutral. It is definitely laced with, if you're guessing sarcasm, you are definitely correct. Let us now examine a question relating to tone. When we look at a passage or a poem or a comprehension piece, the first thing we want to start thinking is, does it have a sarcastic tone? Is the tone neutral? Does it arouse emotions such as anger, fear, happiness, excitement? Am I anxious when I read this passage? And those are some of the things you consider. Let us continue. So, let's look at the word nostalgic. It is referred to as a positive tone. And when I think of the word nostalgic, the first thing that comes to my mind is places and food, especially, that I used to have when I was younger. And so a nice way that you may see this word presented in a piece where this tone comes out is when they refer to, maybe you talk about the pudding that your grandma used to make that you no longer get, or something of the sort. Whimsical, also a positive tone. And when I think of whimsical, immediately I think of my dog Bash, because he's always playing and just amusing. And so you can pick up on a tone of that nature. Let's look at some negative tones. Let's look at the word pedantic. Pedantic is just a fancy way of talking about someone who dwells on minor details, somebody who is very particular. I have a friend who is like that, and she tends to overstress things that are minor. So you may pick up that, and it is referred to as a negative tone. Let's look at the word pompous. Not such a positive word. And this word alludes to someone who is overly confident or thinks they are superior to others or so. And so, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, all my students from the McGrath High School and the ones at the New Life Tabernacle that are watching, and the entire Jamaica, these are some tones that you can pick up on in writing. Let us now look at a question relating to tone. The people have spoken, and we need justice. What tone is used in this statement? Now, as a student who is preparing for CSEC examination, you already know about the strategy of elimination. So the first thing you're going to do is look at your answers. We see the word critical. Is it critical? Is it anger? Do you see the tone being serious, or is it neutral? Now, our knowledge of the word neutral tells us that this is definitely not the answer, and so we can go ahead and strike that one out. Is it serious? Does the person sound angry? Is it critical? And so we narrow down to say maybe not so much critical, and so we are here. Anger or serious? Is it angry, or is the person more serious? And so I will settle with serious, because this person sounds as though they need answers. And so the tone here would definitely show seriousness. Let us now look at this very short passage. It's called Peter Panicked, and it was taken from the 2014 CSEC English examination. Let us have a read. Peter panicked. There was nothing he could do. He was trapped with hundreds of others. The monster had come and was slowly, surely dragging them from the deep. He swam through the excited crowd to try the bottom. Then he tried the top again. The great monster had encircled them completely. There were millions of holes in its great hands, but none large enough. If only they were a little larger. Now, let us look at some questions relating to this passage. What is the writer's tone in the passage, Peter Panicked? And of course, I'm going to give you a second to look at the passage. It's also on the screen. Would we say this is a tone that reflects happiness? Did he sound happy? I think not. Was he anxious? Let us think about that some more. Was he surprised? Or was he more in a reflective manner? I think he was not reflective. And so we can zero in on anxiety or surprise. Was he anxious or was he surprised? I would say he was more anxious, and so anxiety at B would be our best answer there. And students, this is how I want you to reason out the questions when you are doing your examination. So we've been talking a little about tone, and we're now going to be focusing on another aspect of the writer's craft, which is diction. Diction is defined as the choice and use of words and phrases in speech or writing. It is referred to as the centerpiece of a writer's craft, as it helps to determine the tone, purpose, and its audience. The diction also reveals whether the writer intends to be explicit in his presentation or whether he intends to have readers infer knowledge from what is implicitly stated. And what this is saying is sometimes the writer wants to be direct. Sometimes the writer just wants you to go straight to the information, and other times the writer wants you to deduce what he is saying from what is written, and this is where the knowledge is pretty much have to be implied. You have to infer to pick up on what the writer is saying. And so diction is very important. Understanding diction is very important, especially when you're in an examination situation, because oftentimes students misunderstand, and as a result, they do not answer the questions properly. Let's examine this sentence. It says, "The sun scorched our skin as we climbed the rocky mountain." A typical comprehension question may ask, what is the effect of the word scorched as used in the previous sentence? Now this word sticks out almost like a sore thumb. And that is because the sounding alone, scorched, if you examine the word, it kind of helps with the overall meaning of the statement, yes, but it also highlights the severity of the sun, how hot it really is. Of course, they could say burn, but it wouldn't probably tell just how hot the sun was and the impact it had on the skin. And so the word scorch here is what we consider a loaded word. Say, for example, you were asked to say how effective this word was in this sentence. Of course, you'd be expected to talk about all of the things I just said. It is effective because it kind of helps with the overall meaning. You can talk about the fact that it helps you to understand the severity of the sun, as well as the impact it must have had on the skin. All right? Let's look at a question related to diction from the passage we have been studying, Peter Panicked. What effect is the author trying to create by using short sentences at the beginning of the passage? Now say then you don't know what I'm talking about. Peter panicked, that's short. There was nothing he could do. He was trapped with hundreds of others. Those are very short. And now they ask, what effect does this create? Does it create interest? Does it stimulate critical thinking? Does it make the reader curious, or does it create suspense? Now, I don't know about you, but when I saw Peter panicked at the front, immediately I sat up. And so if you're thinking that it creates suspense, then you're definitely thinking on the right path. The great monster had encircled them completely. Who do you think the great monster is that encircled them? And of course, this is a typical question that follows this passage. Unfortunately, oftentimes students say things like, it's probably a man, or it's probably, a bigger shark or so. Unfortunately, they misinterpret the point that is being made here, because this is a prime example of when information is presented that is not explicitly stated. Instead, it is subtly and you stated, and you have to infer knowledge to pick up on what is being asked of you. It is a metaphoric statement, great monster, and that is simply because there is no monster really. They are alluding to something else. What do you think this monster is? If it was implied that this monster was the fishing net, that is what you got, then you are definitely thinking correctly. Remember, it's referred to as the great monster, and they said it encircled them. And of course, in your mind's eye, you should already be visualizing how the net must have been over the fishes. Okay? All right, so we have been talking about diction, and now we're going to be touching on the writer's purpose. What is the writer's purpose, you may ask? How do readers determine the writer's purpose? The writer's purpose is referred to as the reader's ability to know why the writer wrote. And in simple terms, to know what the reader is saying and why he said it. Okay? Oftentimes, when students don't understand the purpose of the writer, what the writer intends to put out there, then the entire comprehension is ruined, as in they don't know how to answer the questions because they don't understand. The writer's craft is demonstrated through types of writing, writing technique, and literary devices in the writer's purpose. And of course, we're going to be exploring what these are. Let us examine the pie strategy first. Now it says, what's the author's purpose? It's as easy as pie. The P is to persuade or to convince the reader of a certain point. I is to inform, to teach or give information to the reader. Entertain, to hold the attention of the reader through enjoyment. And there we have our pie. Now, my question to my CSEC students is, what type of writing do you think you would need to know in order to persuade, inform, and entertain? Let's look at persuade first. To persuade would be, okay, so to persuade is to convince, we already know that, and it says it is used in persuasive writing. Now, oftentimes my students think that persuasive writing, okay, it's an essay for sure. But I want you to remember, students, that the persuasive writing may be presented in the form of an advertisement or an essay or a letter to the editor, all right? And those are still persuasive in nature. Let us look at this one. If you are thinking that to inform means to write an expository piece, then you are definitely thinking on the right path. Unfortunately, students also don't know the different forms in which expository writing takes, and so they assume that it's only an essay. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, that the expository writing may come in the form of a summary or a report or a letter, a diagram, a pie chart, or a brochure. And finally, if the writing is to entertain, then it's definitely narrative writing. And if you see story writing, don't panic. It's the same thing. It is either referred to as a story or a narrative, and it means pretty much the same thing. And these may come in the form of fiction or non-fiction stories. And like I said earlier, the purpose is to entertain. All right, let's look at a question relating to purpose from Peter Panic. It says, what is the type of writing used in the passage Peter Panic? Now, we already read the passage, but it's still there to keep it fresh in your minds. Was it persuasive in nature? Did you see where you were being convinced of anything? Was it a narrative? Was there room for enjoyment? Did you enjoy it? Was it descriptive in nature? Was it a nice descriptive essay that you read? Or was it expository in nature? Did it have factual information and opinions and so on? And this is how I want you to reason the question, students. I would say it was more of a narrative, because although we were a little bit tense, and I'm sure you were worried about Peter like I was, we did enjoy the piece. And so it falls nicely under narrative writing. Let us now look at some writing techniques that are used to bring out the writer's craft. Of course, we know repetition. It's the act of repeating. But I want you to remember, students, that oftentimes you expect to see the same exact words. Remember, sometimes a synonym may be used, a word that is similar, but it has the same meaning. It is still a repetition, okay? Rhetorical questioning. And of course, this one is very much, almost all the time, it's present in persuasive pieces. Italics, bolds, emotive language, colloquial language, and foreshadowing. And if you're thinking about foreshadowing, automatically your mind should be going to narrative writing. I hope you were thinking that. All right, and these are some of the techniques that are used in writing. All right, so let's look at this question. It says, emotive language is used in the passage Peter Panicked. The language used in Peter Panicked can be described as... Now, of course, prior knowledge of these terms will definitely help you to answer this question as easy as pie. Desperation, freedom, happiness, remorse. Let's start from the bottom. Did we see remorse? Was anyone remorseful in this passage? Not so much. Did we see happiness? We can definitely strike that one out. Did we see freedom? Did Peter end up being free at this point? No. And so the best answer here would be desperation. And we saw it in the passage. Who was desperate, you may ask? Peter was desperate. We also can find literary devices in a part of the writer's craft. And some of the popular ones are the metaphor, the oxymoron, the alliteration, simile, onomatopoeia, assonance, hyperbole, and the list goes on. All right? Now, students, the only way you'll be able to effectively answer questions in the examination about literary devices is prior knowledge. And so I encourage you to study these. And if you have or if you use the comprehensive English course at your school, all of these are at the back and the definitions are there. Study them. All right, it says, identify the literary device used in the following sentence. Peter panicked. Was it an oxymoron? Was it a simile? Was it an alliteration? Or was it assonance? Immediately, knowledge of alliteration will tell you, aha, because teacher would have said, of course, when you hear or see a resounding sound in the first letter or the first consonant, then you know it's alliteration. And so this fits nicely because of the p. Peter panicked. And so it must be an alliteration. All right, so we have been looking at diction, purpose, and tone. We know that these features are interconnected, and by that I mean there is not going to be any amount of separation in the comprehension, passage, or poem, right? So you have to look for these things collectively. I also want to encourage you students to become familiar with these concepts. Know how to identify them in questions, in the passage, because knowledge of this will definitely help you to do well on your examination. And of course, we have a nice diagram showing just how interconnected they are. So when you think of diction, you think of the tone that it is connected to and the purpose is connected to, because they're all intertwined to ensure that the writer's craft is rich and nice. All right, so this is quite a passage. It was also taken from a past paper. I think it was 2008. And so we're going to go have a read. Music too loud? I can't study. The editor. I just can't take it anymore. I just can't take the noise forced on me by a restaurant and bar located across the street. The noise is unbearable and I cannot concentrate on my studies. I am writing the CSEC exams in May-June this year and I must pass all my subjects. I am attending a reputable girls' school and I want to make good grades to get into the CAPE class. I work hard and every report so far indicates that I am an above average student. I want to make my mother proud. She is a hard-working woman, especially since my father passed away 2 years ago. We have been struggling to make ends meet without complaint. But now I must complain. Now, because the restaurant and bar is intent on frustrating my ambitions and the sacrifices my mother is making. I appreciate the help of the government in providing opportunities for education, but this is going to be futile unless it is possible to take full advantage of them. Can you imagine having to struggle with a math problem with thunderous noise bombarding your eardrums and everything in the house jumping up and down as if the place is haunted? Can you imagine speaking to a classmate about homework and you can't hear each other? Can you imagine stuffing cotton in your ears in order to get some sleep? Can you imagine trying to explain to your teacher that you didn't do your homework or that you sleep in class because of the noise coming from the restaurant and bar? The noise coming from this place is a serious obstacle that I am unable to overcome, and I am seeking help in dealing with it. Can you imagine my mother and her 16-year-old daughter going to this place in the midst of riotous drinking to ask them to turn down the music because I want to study or just to get some sleep? I understand that residents have been calling the police, but the response has been ineffective. At the moment of writing this letter, Sunday 19th at 9:30 a.m., they are blasting away after going late into last night. Under the guise of carnival, they will continue their merciless onslaught. From Carnival Friday night right up until Ash Wednesday morning, they will continue non-stop. there will be total madness. Quite a mouthful. Now, I hope you were reading along, students. Let us now look at some questions that follow. And of course, these questions are in line with what we have been studying so far. Remember, we looked at the tone, we looked at the diction, and we looked at the writer's purpose to include types of writing, techniques used in writing, the language used in writing. All right, so let's look at the first one. It says, I can't take it anymore in line 1. The tone implies that the writer is. And of course, students, this is the point where, okay, I've also added the particular line that we're focusing on to ensure that you'll be able to remember what we're talking about. It says, I just can't take it anymore. Then I'm forced by the restaurant and bar located across the street. All right, and so on. And it's right here. All right. Okay, so let's examine the answers now. Was the person crying? Was the person arguing? Was the person shouting, or was the person hurting? What do you think is the best answer in this situation? Did we see any evidence of confrontation? Not so much. So we can eliminate arguing. Was the person shouting? Well, maybe at some points, but not the entire thing. So we can eliminate shouting as well. Was the person crying? Well, maybe the person would shed a tear at the memory of the father that was lost or so, but not for the entire thing. And so the best answer here would be hurting. I hope you chose hurting. All right. Let's look at another one. The effect that is created by the repetition of I in the first paragraph can be best described as highlighting the writers. And of course, this question is directly linked to diction. Very good. If you thought that, then you are definitely thinking correctly. Remember, we said that repetition is a technique used, and the word I was definitely visible in the paragraph. Let's look at it. I just can't take it. I cannot concentrate. I am writing. I am attending, and so on. Okay. Did we see the person's view coming out? Did we see frustration coming out? Did we see the person protesting, or did we see the person's voice? Which answer do you think would be the best one for this situation? If you said you saw the person's view coming out, then you are definitely doing the right thing. All right. The word I there suggests personal, me, my point, my hurt, right? And so it would definitely be showing the person's view. Let's look at number 3. Which of the following language devices does the writer use most in the paragraph 2 to explain her plight? Now, if you notice, the word most is in bold, and that is not just for decorational purposes. It's to ensure that you remember that if you see a little toops of it in anything else, not the right answer. It says most. All right, so let's look at the answer. Is it a pun? Is it repetition? Do you see rhetorical questions? Is it contrasting? Let's look at the passage again. And I hope you can see it clearly from home. But again, prior knowledge would tell you that closer to the end of the passage, there are a lot of questions, and these are referred to as rhetorical questions. And so, of course, the best answer there, the one that the writer used the most, would be rhetorical question at C. Okay? Let us move on to number 4. Jumping up and down as if the place is haunted. Line 12 is an example of which of the following device? Let's look at the line a little more. The line was in reference to something. It says, can you imagine having to struggle with a math problem with thunderous noise bombarding our eardrum and everything in the house jumping up and down as if the place is haunted? What is being referred to as jumping up and down? Again, prior knowledge of your literary devices would tell you, aha, who jump up and down again? People. But music boxes are not people. Oh, so then, in this instance, human-like characteristics are being given to something that is definitely not human, the speaker box. And so if you thought personification, then you are definitely thinking correctly, because we know that speaker box cannot jump. Very good job if you got that one correct. Let's look at number 5. The type of writing in this piece can be best described as, was it an expository piece? Was it persuasive in nature? Was it a nice story, narrative, or was it descriptive? Again, prior knowledge of these will definitely tell you what to look for. So let's examine expository. Did we see a lot of information presented, factual information, maybe some opinion, a little, somewhat? But let's look at B, persuasive. We already know that persuasive writing may come in the form of advertisements. They may come in the form of letters to the editor, or they may come in the form of essays. What did we examine earlier? Let's look again. Sorry. Okay, so we're not looking at the passage again, but we remember. All right? So what did we look at? What was it trying to do? If you're thinking, yes, man, that person was trying to convince us of something, then you're definitely thinking correctly. And because somebody was trying to convince us of something, we know that the best answer there would have to be persuasive, because it's in this form of writing that we try to persuade or convince somebody of something. All right, and so our best answer there would be persuasive. Let's look at number 6, and this is the final one. What is the writer's intention in the passage being studied? Now, when you see the word intention, students, do not panic. Intention is just another way of CSEC, for CSEC to ask you the writer's purpose. Okay, so you may see another word other than for purpose. You may see intention, you may see aim, you may see objective. It's the same thing. Okay, so what is the writer's intention in the passage being studied? Did the writer want to inform us of something? Were we being given information? Was the writer trying to persuade us? Was the writer trying to entertain us? Or was the writer trying to describe something to us? Of course, the best answer there would be to persuade us, for us to understand her plight, and of course, for action to be taken. All right, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the end of the quiz. But before we go, I want to take some time to focus on something else that students often forget when they're doing their examination. Now, it's good and nice to, yes, I know the answer and so on, but sometimes with the best of intentions, we go into the examination and we forget some very minor things and we wind up losing focus and we fail the examination. Now, remember that the multiple choice is split in 2 sections, section A and section B. And comprehension is where section B would be. And it's the bulk of the questions. It's 35 questions out of the 60. And as such, you have to be able to do well in this section. All right. And so I want to leave you with some tips to ensure that you do well in your examination and you not fail because of these things. All right. So let's look at them. Number 1, I want you to remember to read the instructions carefully to ensure that you understand what you are being asked to do. Not what you think you are to do or what you have in mind that they may ask you. No, read the instructions properly. All right. Then read the passage or poem or diagram twice, at least twice. If you are a fast reader and after the first 2 read, you think, well, maybe I'm a little bit gray in some areas, read it again. Okay. Time yourselves properly. Next, I want you to look at the questions, but only after reading the passage. Do not approach the questions first. Okay. Next, I want you to pay attention to details, especially words in bold. Students, when the words are in bold, it's not for decorational purposes. They are intentional in doing so. And some of these words may be not, except, best. Sometimes you see the word both as well, most, as we saw earlier in one of our questions. Or options such as all of the above and none of the above. All right. Also zoom in on questions that ask you to pick 2. So like B and C or A and D, questions of that nature. Pay attention and say then you thought you had the right answer and you chose something. But further down you saw something like all of the above or none of the above. Check and recheck. All right. Try to answer the question before looking at the points. I can't stress that enough. So you make sure that you read the question first, right? If you're sure of the answer, I know this, bread and butter, select it and move on. If you're not sure of the answer, then move on to return later. Notice I said return later, and I'll tell you why in a few. Eliminate through reasoning to narrow down choices, and I'm sure you saw us doing a lot of that earlier. So, okay, let's reason. Of course, the paper is not a physical person, but you reason, all right? So it definitely is not this, but it could be this or this. Let me go back to the passage to look at what this says again, and then we can say, oh, it's definitely not this. And so you narrow down until you're closer to your answers, all right? Number 9, turn true or false questions into statements and then select the one that is true, and then you'll find your answer. It's a simple hack that I learned late in life. Number 10, never leave a question blank. Always give an answer. There is a 25% chance it may be correct. No, I'm no mathematician, but I would prefer to have a 25% chance than nothing at all. And so I can't stress enough, students, remember, do not leave any multiple choice questions blank. If worst come to worst, and I do mean worst, guess. You still have a 25% chance of getting it right. Yes, the 75% chance of getting it wrong is big, but there is still a small window that you just may get it right. Now, before I go, I want to send a special shout out to the McGrath High family. That is my school in Linstead, St. Catherine. I trust that all my students were watching and that this session was useful. Before we go, just want to recap quickly. Today we looked at the writer's craft. We looked at purpose, tone, diction. We talk about how they are all intertwined to make the writer's presentation rich. And of course, with knowledge of this, when you understand what the writer is saying, what the writer included, whether the information is implied or it is explicitly stated, then you are well on your way. Comprehension is doable. It is nothing to be feared. You can pass and you can do well. All you have to do is, first of all, make sure that you understand the information that is presented, what it wants from you, and then you are well on your way. Also, students, remember that after you look at the comprehension passage and you understand it, don't start just, flying through the questions. Make sure that you still read the questions. And I have a strategy that I used, I should have mentioned earlier. Go back to the passage or the comprehension piece as many times as you want to. It's there. So you're kind of sure, but you're not sure. Then still just go ahead and check and double check and triple check to ensure that you have the best answer. When you are finished, go back through your paper to recheck your answers. Make sure that what you present at the end of the examination is your best attempt. Good luck to all the students. I do hope that you are ready because time is winding down. Do your best. And above all, remember to pray. I have to include that. Thank you for watching. I do hope that you enjoy the presentation and that you learned something positive today. Be blessed.